Hey church, welcome back to another episode of Capital Edge Midweek. On this month's episode, our theme is the Great Physician. We're talking about Jesus as our healer. Jackson, roll that intro. In today's episode, we are hearing from 4 different people, 3 different testimonies of Jesus' healing in their lives. Obviously, when you share your testimony, there's a lot of context you need to go into. And so we had to trim down a fair bit of their stories, a fair bit of their interviews for today's midweek episode. But we did edit their full interviews, their full testimonies in full. They're on the YouTube channel for you to check out in your own time. The links are in the description. Today we're going to just be watching a short snippet from each interview. First we're going to hear from Fulop, then we're going to hear from Damien Wilkie, and lastly from the Steenbergens, Grace and Joel. Check it out. Now, obviously, we're talking about Jesus as the great physician. We're talking about healing. And you've got a story about your ear, but it goes back further than that. There's more context to that. How about you share some of that story with us?
Go back to the beginning of that?
Yeah, go back to the start, yeah.
Okay. In early 2017, I noticed that there was a bit of a lump on the side of my neck. I actually thought it was a spider bite from a spider at the farm, because I went like that one day and it was around about the same time, so I sort of put it down to the spider, but it wasn't in fact the spider at all. So a few months later I went to the, it wasn't hurting, it wasn't sore or anything. I went to the my GP and he arranged for me to have a scan done, and very quickly got back to me to say that he was quite blunt about it. He said it's cancer.
Wow. In
the end, I had surgery to remove that cancer, and then I had to go in a second time to remove one on this side. It was only a tiny little lump that I could just feel by rubbing the skin like that. The surgeries weren't all that bad. I didn't mind them so much. It was more the treatment, the chemotherapy, not so much the chemo, but more the radiation.
Yeah.
Radiation is pretty intense. I had 33 daily doses. You don't feel anything when you're going through that treatment. It's just afterwards that you notice the side effects. When I went to see my specialist, I told him, because what was happening, I was losing hearing in my right ear. It was sort of coming on and off. And when I had to go and see him as part of a checkup, he had a look at it and he said, there's infection in your ear. And he also said that the skin or the flesh around the ear bone has been burnt off by the radiation.
Wow.
So anyway, he gave me antibiotics to fix up the infection in the ear, and then things just settled down.
Yeah.
But he said to me, with the ear bone, the blood vessels in the ear bone are burnt away, the flesh around the bone is burnt away, and sometime down the track you're going to lose your hearing permanently. He said there's no surgery, no hearing aid, no cochlear implant or any of those sort of things is going to make any difference. During this time, along this journey, I know God has always been there. I remember a couple of verses that Alan gave me. Alan came and visited me in the hospital, and Pastor John, a few others, and it was one verse, it went something like this from the New Living Translation: as God directs our steps, we don't have to understand everything along the way, you know? Because what you're thinking through all these sorts of things is, why me? You know, why did it happen to me? Ratner warned me, he said, don't go there, it's dangerous. And he was right, so yeah. I just left it up to the Lord.
Yeah.
Getting back to the my specialist, with that finding of the condition of the ear bone, he said to me, I want you to come and see me every 3 months to have that ear cleaned out. So I've been doing that ever since. Anyway, the last time I went there was early August, and he had a doctor with him who was learning, and before he came in to see me, she cleaned out my ear as part of her training. Mm-hmm. She did a great job. Anyway, when she'd finished doing that work, he came in and he had a look himself. And he was absolutely amazed. He said to the other doctor, "Did you know that there's skin or flesh growing back on that ear bone?" He says, "I'm excited about this." Wow. And during the course of the visit, he said it about 3 times. And he's more excited than I was. I'm trying to take all this in. And
so this is skin and flesh that has been burnt away by radiation?
Yeah, absolutely,
wow.
Yeah.
And it's grown back?
Yeah. You know, there was questions I wanted to ask him about it, which I'll ask him next time, but I didn't. I was, I was just trying to come to terms with it all. As I said, he was more excited than me. But I always, through this, I'm always thinking God's in complete control.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
I just leave it in God's hands. And then he said to me, "You know, this is a miracle." I said, "Yeah." He said, after all, "You're the miracle man." Because 12 months earlier, he told me that he never expected me to live that long.
Wow.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our church family and others for their prayers and support during this difficult time. I've really appreciated it. Sometimes we just don't understand how valuable that is, and I'm truly grateful. As I said before, when I go on my prayer walks, I'm always thinking of entering his courts with thanksgiving and praise.
Yeah.
So important. So, I want to thank all of our church family. There'll be many that don't know me, but there are many that do. And as I say, I've been here a fair while now, and I appreciate all the support that myself and my family get in along this journey.
So, Damien, for anyone watching who hasn't met you, could you just introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, g'day everybody. My name's Damien. I've been coming to Capital Edge now for about 4 years. I found this place through a friend of mine who was visiting me in rehab. Look, before rehab, I thought I was a pretty normal guy. Picked up drugs, at a pretty young age, and just thought that was the normal thing. Hanging out with a lot of older kids, and then as I become a bit more mature and started working, alcohol was just a part of it's Australian culture.
Yeah.
So I didn't realise I was doing anything wrong, and to be honest, I wasn't really doing anything wrong. Where it done the damage is I was just distracting myself of my childhood pain.
And then how did you get from that point to coming to Jesus?
Well, yeah, I didn't go to rehab because I sort of felt that I needed to, get my act together. I went to rehab because I was very, very emotionally, and now I understand, was spiritually destroyed. I'll never forget in rehab turning 40, having to cancel my huge 40th birthday party, from the rehab. And it was probably my first real big prayer, and I wasn't physically in pain, but I was mentally and spiritually in so much agony, and I dropped to my knees and just cried. Like, I don't even think I said words. I just cried with heartache, just depression of being, turning 40 in rehab.
Wow. So obviously, when we think of Jesus healing people, you think of all the classic stories of, Jesus raising someone from the dead, or healing a leper, or healing the blind eyes, or, but hand in hand with that, he also releases people from the bondage of sin. And often when he heals people in the Bible, he says, you're forgiven. Your faith has healed you, So, and you were talking then about an emotional and spiritual anguish that was in your heart knowing, oh, this is where my life is at. I'm 40 years old and I'm in rehab. That was a low point for you.
Yep.
How did things turn from there?
Look, I'm really glad you mentioned people's miracle healings, because mine was not like that at all. I was in a lot of pain to get to where I was. Lost so many things, but mentally and spiritually, I was bankrupt. But what Jesus, so where God really comes into place is that He put everything I needed in front of me. He didn't just miraculously cure me from my addictions. He lined up the rehab. He lined up Capital Edge. He lined up all my friends in recovery. And the journey has been a pretty long journey. 4 years in recovery now. It really took a toll on me about a year and a half ago, just before my 3rd birthday. I had what we call a spiritual awakening, which was all about my self-worth, Hamish, because before the drugs and alcohol, I was a traumatised kid, carrying a lot of baggage that didn't realise I was carrying this baggage. But the gifts of recovery have taught me to go back to the early days and work out why I abused substances all through life. And it wasn't because I enjoyed the substances. It was more because I didn't like the person I was. And last lockdown, I was very lucky enough to see a psychiatrist, and we'd done a lot of stuff over Zoom, and I had an amazing spiritual awakening on self-worth. Where I'm at now in life is I never thought life could be like this. I was a young kid. If I was to dream about the ideal life, it wouldn't be what I've got, but it wouldn't be nowhere near of what I've got. Because what Jesus and what recovery has taught me is that I can deal with anything that's placed in front of me, and take it all in my stride. Like with this lockdown, I know it's affecting a lot of people, and I've got lots of friends that aren't in recovery, and because they don't need to be in recovery, they don't abuse substances like I did, and they sort of wondered the first lockdown how I was so calm and okay with it. And I said, I've got God in my life, and I've also got a program of recovery which teaches me powerlessness and acceptanceness, and that was something that I could never deal with ever in my life. So, if I wasn't in recovery and if I didn't accept Jesus into my life, lockdown would have maybe killed me. It's been very traumatic on so many people. So what I've learned is Jesus is there. He's got my back. He loves me. He wants me to be the best version of myself, but I've got to put in the effort. That night in rehab when I was on my knees in tears, I would have loved to everything just have been lifted. And I'm sitting here today, sitting here with you 3 years ago instead of now, telling my story. But I know myself too well, and if it was just like that, I would just take it for granted, and it wouldn't be long, and I'd be up to the same stuff. So I need to. That's the only way I learn is hands-on. So I've got to get in the mud. I've got to do it, and that's the only way it sinks in for me. People have told me my whole life, don't do this, don't do that. Alcohol is addictive, drugs are bad, but I had to live that life to realise how painful it was.
So in 2017, we decided that we would like to try for a family. We had been married 6 months, a year. Yeah. Yep. And decided we wanted to try for a family. And the previous year I had been diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so we knew that it might be difficult to have a baby, but also it may not affect it at all. And so it was, just however it went. And so... so we decided to try for a family, and that led to 2.5, 3 years of trying for a baby and infertility and specialist appointments and injections and medications that made me go a bit crazy.
Your words, not mine.
And just a whole array of diagnoses and surgery. So it was a big thing. So it's actually interesting because in Consecration Sunday in 2017, which is a Sunday we have where we dedicate the year to the Lord, a man in our church actually asked us if we wanted to become parents, and he had no idea that we were hoping to try for a family that year. And so he asked if he could pray for us, and he actually prayed for us and spoke over us and spoke over the kind of mum and dad and parents we would be. And we had no idea what the next few years would turn out like. And so that was just highlighted to me right from the beginning that Jesus was at work and God was over it and had his finger on it, and that Jesus was healing and a part of the story right from the very start before any of us even knew what was to come, which is just amazing. So yeah, and that's a word that I held on to the whole time that brought me peace and comfort in those times of doubt and fear and upset and hurt and pain. That was something that I was able to hold on to. So it's just amazing how even without the miracle at the end, God was healing, and Jesus was healing right from the very outset, which is amazing. So yeah, after a year, there was still no baby, so we were referred to a specialist, a fertility specialist. And that led to going on medication to see if that would help. And so we did 4 months or 4 rounds of medication and lots of blood tests, lots of hormone tracking, a whole rigmarole of tests and things like that. But again, still no baby. And so I ended up having surgery for suspected endometriosis, and they did find endo, and it was stage 1, luckily. And so after recovering from surgery, we went into another few rounds of medication, hopefully with the surgery having improved our chances. And the first couple of rounds I didn't respond to the medication at all this time, and so obviously that's really disheartening because we thought the surgery would be the answer, and it wasn't.
That was the main thing stopping it all.
And so we were down to our final round of medication or cycle, so to speak, and this was the final cycle before further medical intervention would be the only option, and we had both prayed about it, and we had both individually got a clear answer from God that was not the plan that he had for us and for our journey. And he said it was a clear no, so we knew that after this cycle that was it, we were on our own. No more medical help, which takes us to youth camp in 2020, and Joel and I were both there serving. As we had done in the past, and we were there just to help out with the kids and whatever. And in the first service, in the first worship song, and we weren't expecting anything for us because we were there to help the kids and to see them and encounter God. As you guys would know. And so the first worship song was Canvas and Clay, and it was just, we sing it sometimes, but the first verse goes, "In my mother's womb you formed me with your hands, known and loved by you before the world began. When I doubt it, Lord, remind me, I'm wonderfully made. You're an artist and a potter, I'm the canvas and the clay." And throughout that song, God was just talking to me so clearly about how he was the creator, and even though I felt like my body had failed and there was all these things wrong with me, he made everything perfect, and I was his canvas and he was the artist, and he could create nothing out of the impossible. I mean, anything out of the impossible. And so that was crazy. And then during that song, I got a vision of our daughter as a 16-year-old being a youth leader one day, and which just astounded me because usually I don't see visually. God doesn't speak to me visually, but he clearly did that night, which is why throughout my pregnancy I was so certain she was a girl.
Wow.
And then that night I went to bed and I had a dream of a positive pregnancy test, and I knew that it was mine. And I had that dream before, but not about me. And so and I woke up and I was like, I think I'm pregnant. And I was just pregnant, but I didn't know it then at the time, which is just crazy. And so then fast forward to the 30th of November, 2020, not this year, last year, 2020. And we had little Alba, and her name is, yes, you. And her name is Alba Hope, and Alba means white, pure, bright. And so we just hope that her life and her story can just be such a bright, shining light of the Jesus who saves and the Jesus who heals.
Come on.
Which is amazing, because he does. It's unbelievable. And it's just crazy. I just wanted to share this quickly, because I think Pastor Mel from C3 shared at Revival Week actually about how God changed Sarah's life from when she couldn't conceive. She did in Genesis 18, a really bitter, sarcastic, I don't believe it, hurt kind of laugh when she heard God say that this time next year Sarah will have a son. And she laughed this almost this ironic, bitter laugh in that scripture. And I actually wrote this on January 6, 2020, and it says, January 6, 2020, sorry. And it says, in the early hours of Monday morning, which was that day, I still couldn't sleep, so I got up and read this day's devotional. And you see, after another failed cycle and some hard things to comprehend, I had spent days in grief and confusion, lots of tears, inability to sleep at night, not eating, and worst of all, so many negative thoughts and emotions. My faith talk was non-existent. Joel had tried to talk to me before bed with positivity and faith, and he had tried so hard to convince me that this isn't it for us, and God's got a plan and it will happen in his time. And with tears streaming down my face, I had laughed at him sadistically, sarcastically, bitterly and painfully, in disbelief and with no hope. And I shared this same laugh with Sarah. And so what a shock to read this story today. Same circumstances, same laughter, but now I have the hope that God could change my laughter too someday. And so then you fast forward to exactly a year from that date, same as Sarah. This time next year, and my devotion, it was the same passage, but this time I wrote, I am in awe and reminded to surrender everything to him, the one who's powerful, in control, keeps his promises, does the impossible, saves, shows mercy, and does things in his perfect timing. I thank him for doing these things in my life and showing his sovereignty in our journey to Alba, and I thank him for my little Alba Hope. So that's crazy that was a year, and he changed my laughter just as he did Sarah's, from this bitter, angry, upset, hurt laughter to this one of pure joy and elation at his miracle working power. And so just, learn that Jesus cares about your laughter, and he cares about your joy, and he cares about your emotions and how you're healing. Physically, I still have polycystic ovaries, I have endometriosis, I have Crohn's, but I am healed and I have Alba, which is just amazing. So, yeah.
Well, what a great episode we've had this month. In a second, the discussion questions for your Connect group are going to be up on the screen for you guys to go over. And then after that, some prayer points are going to be put up for you to pray over as a group, just praying for some specific needs in the life of the church. We love you, and we'll see you on Church Online this Sunday. Bye.